The conference room on the 45th floor of Manhattan's most expensive building went dead silent. Jonathan Pierce, CEO of AgriCorp Industries and one of the wealthiest men in America, stared at the weathered farmer standing across from him in mud-stained boots and a flannel shirt. "You're challenging me to what?" Jonathan asked, certain he'd misheard. "A bet," said Thomas Murphy, a third-generation farmer from Iowa. "6 months, you work my farm, I'll work your company. Whoever produces better results wins." The board members laughed. Jonathan's assistant tried to escort Thomas out, but Jonathan held up his hand, intrigued despite himself. "And what exactly do I get when I win?" Jonathan asked with an arrogant smile. Thomas didn't smile back. "You get to learn why your company is destroying lives, and I get to prove that real wealth isn't measured in dollars." What happened over the next 6 months didn't just change two men's lives. It shocked Wall Street, transformed an entire industry, and proved that sometimes the poorest person in the room is the richest in ways that matter. Jonathan Pierce had built AgriCorp Industries from a small agricultural supply company into a $20 billion empire. His business model was ruthlessly efficient. Buy up farmland across America, implement industrial farming techniques, maximize yields through heavy pesticide and fertilizer use, and squeeze every possible penny of profit from the soil. Wall Street loved him. His quarterly earnings were legendary. His stock price only went up. Business schools taught case studies about his agricultural revolution. But there was a darker side to Jonathan's success. His industrial farming methods depleted soil quality. His heavy chemical use contaminated water supplies. His company bought up family farms at rock-bottom prices when farmers couldn't compete, then turned those farms into massive monoculture operations. Small towns that had thrived on family farming for generations were dying. The farmers Jonathan put out of business often lost everything: homes, land that had been in their families for a century, their entire way of life. Jonathan didn't lose sleep over it. "That's progress," he'd tell anyone who questioned his methods. "We're feeding America more efficiently than ever before. Some people get left behind. That's just economics." He'd never actually worked on a farm, never planted a seed or harvested a crop, never felt soil between his fingers or understood what it meant to depend on weather, seasons, and the unpredictable nature of growing things. To Jonathan, farming was just numbers on a spreadsheet. Inputs and outputs, costs and revenues, nothing more. Thomas Murphy was everything Jonathan was not. He'd inherited 160 acres in rural Iowa from his father, who'd inherited it from his father. 3 generations of Murphys had worked that land, growing corn, soybeans, and raising cattle. Thomas farmed the old way, crop rotation to keep soil healthy, minimal chemicals, cover crops, sustainable practices his grandfather had taught him. His farm wasn't hugely profitable by Wall Street standards, but it was sustainable. It produced quality food. It supported his family and 2 employees. It kept a small piece of rural America alive. Then AgriCorp came to town. They bought out Thomas's neighbors one by one. Families who couldn't compete with industrial farming prices, who couldn't afford the expensive equipment and chemicals AgriCorp used, who finally gave up and sold. Within 3 years, Thomas's farm was an island in a sea of AgriCorp-owned industrial agriculture. And AgriCorp wanted his land too. They made offer after offer, each one more aggressive than the last. When Thomas refused, they got nasty. They lobbied for regulations that hurt small farms. They undercut his prices. They made it nearly impossible for him to survive. Thomas's wife Sarah begged him to sell. "We can't compete, Tom. They're going to crush us anyway." But Thomas refused. "This land is our family's legacy, our children's inheritance. I won't let some corporation erase 100 years of our family's work just to add another line to their profit report." So Thomas did something desperate. He researched Jonathan Pierce. He found out when AgriCorp's board meeting was scheduled. He drove 18 hours straight to New York City. And he walked into that boardroom with an outrageous proposal. "Let me get this straight," Jonathan said, leaning back in his chair. "You want to switch places with me for 6 months?" "That's right," Thomas said firmly. "You come work my farm, do the actual labor, plant, tend, harvest, live on a farmer's income, and I'll run AgriCorp, make your business decisions." The board members were openly laughing now. This was absurd. But Jonathan found himself curious. This farmer had driven across the country to challenge him. There was something bold about that, something that reminded Jonathan of himself 20 years ago, before he'd become insulated by wealth and power. "What are the terms?" Jonathan asked. "Simple. After 6 months, we compare results. You measure the farm's success crop yield, soil quality, profit, sustainability. I measure the company's success stock price, employee satisfaction, community impact, long-term viability." "And if I win," Jonathan asked, "you win, I sell you my farm. No more fighting. You get what you want." "And if you win," Thomas looked him dead in the eye, "you change how AgriCorp does business. You stop destroying family farms. You implement sustainable practices. You remember that farming isn't just about profit. It's about people and land and legacy." The room erupted in objections. Jonathan's lawyers were already listing reasons this was impossible. His board members thought it was insane. But Jonathan held up his hand for silence. He'd spent 20 years crushing competitors, making ruthless decisions, and never second-guessing himself. But lately, something had been missing. He felt empty, disconnected, like he was winning a game that didn't actually matter. Maybe this crazy farmer was offering him something he didn't even know he needed. "I accept," Jonathan said. Jonathan Pierce arrived in Iowa on a Monday morning in early spring, dressed in brand new work clothes that still had the tags on them. Thomas's wife Sarah met him at the farmhouse with a simple message. "Your day starts at 5 a.m. You'll work until dark. No shortcuts, no hiring help. You do what Tom does." Jonathan's first day nearly broke him. He'd never experienced physical labor like this, repairing fences in freezing rain, mucking out animal stalls, operating equipment that required actual skill, not just money. By noon, his hands were blistered. By evening, every muscle in his body screamed. He called his assistant that night. "Get me out of this. This is insane." But then he thought about his board watching, waiting for him to quit. His pride wouldn't let him. The second week was worse. A storm damaged part of the barn. Equipment broke down. 3 calves got sick and needed round-the-clock care. Jonathan worked through the night, exhausted and filthy, realizing with growing horror that this was Thomas's everyday reality. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Thomas was having his own reckoning. He'd never been in a corporate environment, didn't understand the jargon or the politics or the ruthless efficiency everyone operated with. He sat in meetings where executives casually discussed optimizing farms, which Thomas now understood meant destroying families like his. But Thomas had something the executives didn't. He understood the real cost of their decisions. In his first board meeting, an executive proposed buying out another struggling family farm region. "Do it," most board members agreed. "The numbers make sense." Thomas stood up. "Have any of you met these farmers, visited their land, understood what you're taking from them?" Awkward silence. "I have an alternative proposal," Thomas said. "Instead of buying them out, we partner with them. We provide resources and market access while they maintain ownership and implement sustainable practices." "That's not as profitable," the CFO objected. "In the short term," Thomas agreed. "But these farmers have generational knowledge. They understand the land. They're invested in ways we never could be. That has value you can't measure in quarterly earnings." The board dismissed his idea, but Thomas planted a seed. By month 3, something remarkable was happening. Jonathan was changing the physical work, the direct connection to land and animals, the understanding of how weather and seasons and countless variables outside his control affected outcomes. It was humbling. He started talking to neighboring farmers, heard their stories, learned that the farms AgriCorp had bought weren't just transactions, they were legacies destroyed, families displaced, communities erased. One evening, an elderly farmer named Bill stopped by Thomas's farm. "You're the AgriCorp guy, right?" Bill asked. Jonathan tensed, expecting anger. "Your company bought my farm 3 years ago," Bill continued. "Paid me a fraction of what it was worth. Told me I was inefficient, outdated. I lost land my great-grandfather homesteaded. Haven't been the same since." Jonathan didn't have a corporate answer, just shame. "I'm sorry, I never thought about it that way." "You never thought about us at all," Bill said quietly. "We were just numbers." That conversation haunted Jonathan. He realized he'd spent 20 years treating people as obstacles to profit. He'd built an empire by erasing other people's dreams. Meanwhile, in New York, Thomas was making unexpected progress. He couldn't change the company overnight, but he started small. He visited farms AgriCorp owned. He talked to workers who were treated poorly. He reviewed environmental impact reports that executives had buried. And he started building alliances. A few board members, the ones with consciences, began listening to his ideas about sustainable agriculture, fair treatment of farmers, and long-term thinking over quarterly profits. "Our stock might take a short-term hit," Thomas admitted in one meeting, "but we'll build something sustainable, something that matters, something people can be proud of." Month 5 brought crisis to both men. In Iowa, a severe drought hit. Crops were failing. Jonathan watched Thomas's farm, now his responsibility, struggling. The old Jonathan would have thrown money at the problem. But he'd learned that some problems can't be solved with money. Only with knowledge, patience, and community. Jonathan reached out to neighboring farmers for advice. They taught him water conservation techniques, how to prioritize which crops to save, how to support livestock through drought. And something beautiful happened. The same farmers whose lives AgriCorp had destroyed helped Jonathan anyway. Because that's what farming communities do, they help each other survive. "Why are you helping me?" Jonathan asked Bill one day. "After what my company did to you?" Bill smiled sadly. "Because I remember when Tom helped me through a bad season. Because neighbors help neighbors. That's something your company tried to kill, but couldn't." In New York, Thomas faced his own crisis. Agricorp's stock price was dropping. The board was panicking. They wanted to fire Thomas and bring back Jonathan's aggressive tactics. But Thomas stood firm in an emergency meeting. "You're measuring the wrong things," he said. "Yes, our stock is down, but employee retention is up 30%. Environmental violations are down 50%. We've partnered with 40 family farms instead of destroying them. We're building something that will last." "Shareholders don't care about lasting," an executive shouted. "They care about returns." "Then, get different shareholders," Thomas replied calmly. "Find investors who understand that a company should do more than just make rich people richer. Find investors who believe business can be a force for good." It was a radical suggestion, and it nearly got Thomas fired. But 3 board members stood with him. 3 people who'd been watching Thomas's approach and started questioning their own values. 6 months to the day after their challenge began, Jonathan and Thomas met back in that Manhattan boardroom. Jonathan looked different, tanned, leaner, wearing actual work clothes instead of a suit. But more than his appearance had changed, his eyes were different, humbler, wiser. Thomas looked exhausted but proud. "Okay," the board chairman said. "Time to measure results. Jonathan, how did the farm perform?" Jonathan pulled out his report. The drought hurt yields. Profit was down 15% compared to last year. By traditional Agricorp metrics, I failed. The board members smiled. They'd won. "But," Jonathan continued, "soil quality improved significantly. Water usage was down 30% through conservation techniques. And we built relationships with neighboring farmers that created a support network worth more than any profit margin." He looked directly at the board. "I learned that you can't measure a farm's success in just one season or just in dollars. Thomas's farm is healthy, sustainable, and part of a living community. Agricorp's industrial farms are profitable but dying. We're destroying the soil, poisoning the water, and erasing the communities that make rural America work." Silence. "Thomas," the chairman said stiffly, "your results?" Thomas stood. "Stock price is down 12%. I won't lie about that. But here's what else happened. Employee satisfaction is up 40%. Environmental violations are down 60%. We've created partnerships with 80 family farms who are now more profitable and sustainable. Customer trust is improving, and 3 major investment firms specializing in sustainable business have expressed interest in taking larger positions in Agricorp." He pulled out a thick folder. "I have testimonials from farmers, employees, and community members. People who say for the first time they're proud to be associated with Agricorp. That has value you can't measure in quarterly reports." The board members looked uncomfortable. "So who won?" someone asked. Jonathan and Thomas looked at each other and smiled. "We both did," Jonathan said. "I learned that business shouldn't destroy lives to create wealth. And Thomas proved that doing the right thing doesn't have to mean losing everything." What happened next shocked Wall Street. Jonathan didn't just fulfill his end of the bargain, he revolutionized it. He restructured Agricorp completely. He sold off industrial farms and created partnership programs with family farmers instead. He implemented sustainable agriculture practices across the company. He cut executive salaries and raised worker wages. Wall Street analysts predicted disaster. Agricorp's stock dropped another 20% initially. But then something unexpected happened. The stock stabilized, then started growing. slowly at first, then steadily. Investors who cared about ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors flooded in. Consumers began preferring AgriCorp products, knowing they were sustainably produced. Farmers who'd once hated the company started partnering with it. Within 2 years, AgriCorp was more valuable than before, not just in stock price, but in real, measurable, positive impact. Thomas returned to his farm, but not alone. Jonathan visited regularly, getting his hands dirty, staying connected to the reality of farming. They'd become unlikely friends, two men from different worlds who'd taught each other invaluable lessons. The business case studies changed. Now they taught about Jonathan Pierce and Thomas Murphy, the billionaire and the farmer who proved that compassion and profit aren't enemies. That sustainable success requires thinking about people, not just numbers. That real wealth includes things no balance sheet can measure. Jonathan Pierce could have laughed off Thomas Murphy's challenge, could have had security escort the muddy farmer out of his pristine boardroom, could have continued destroying family farms without a second thought. Instead, he accepted a challenge that transformed him. He discovered that getting his hands dirty in Iowa soil taught him more about business than 20 years in Manhattan boardrooms. He learned that the poorest farmer in his supply chain had wisdom his highest-paid executives lacked. Thomas Murphy could have given up when AgriCorp targeted his farm, could have taken the money and walked away, could have let bitterness consume him. Instead, he drove 18 hours to challenge a billionaire to his face. He proved that courage isn't about money or power, it's about standing up for what matters, even when you're outmatched. Their story reminds us that we're all teachers and students, that the person you're crushing might have something to teach you, that real success isn't about how much you accumulate, but how much you contribute, that sometimes the best business decision is the most human one. Wall Street was shocked because Thomas proved something the financial world tries to deny, that you can't measure everything that matters in dollars. That legacy, community, sustainability, and human dignity have value beyond quarterly earnings, that the richest person isn't always the one with the biggest bank account. Have you ever been challenged by someone you underestimated? Have you learned something valuable from an unexpected teacher? Share your story in the comments. And if Jonathan and Thomas's journey inspired you, please like and subscribe for more stories about people who prove that kindness, courage, and compassion can change even the most hardened hearts. Remember, real wealth isn't what you have. It's what you give, who you help, and what you leave behind that's better than you found it. That's a lesson worth more than any fortune.